I always thought of myself as a good wife. Not perfect, but good. For 10 years, Adam and I had built a life together, one that appeared flawless from the outside, a beautiful apartment in a quiet, upscale neighborhood, long vacations in places we once dreamed of visiting, and an unspoken understanding that we were partners in everything. But lately, that life had begun to feel like a polished veneer over something empty. I don't know when exactly the shift happened. Maybe it was gradual, creeping in like the quiet hum of an appliance you don't notice until it stops. Adam was successful, brilliant, even. As an architect, his mind was always working, sketching ideas on napkins over dinner, checking emails at odd hours, answering calls from clients who seemed to own every part of him except his body. I used to admire his dedication. Now I resented it. Our conversations had become predictable exchanges of logistical updates. Did you pay the gas bill? Don't forget we have dinner with your sister next week. He never noticed that I had stopped sharing the small details of my day, or that I no longer asked about his. I couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened, but I knew deep down that I was no longer the person I used to be. The woman who laughed with him over silly inside jokes, who waited excitedly for his return from work just to hear about his day. Those moments were gone, replaced by this growing emptiness. Then there was Daniel. It wasn't planned. We didn't even mean to meet. I'd stopped at the coffee shop near the magazine office, needing a quick break from my latest piece on the emotional neglect in marriage. The article felt ironic now, as though it was written for someone else, a version of me I couldn't seem to recognize. That's when I saw him, sitting alone, his eyes buried in a thick psychology book. It had been years since we last spoke, back in university. But there he was. His presence was comforting. Something familiar, like a breath of fresh air on a stuffy day. He hadn't changed much. His dark hair was graying at the temples, but his eyes still held that same sharpness. We greeted each other like old friends do, with the kind of ease that only comes with shared history. He asked about my life, and I found myself telling him, probably more than I should have. There was no pretense with Daniel. I didn't have to hide behind the mask of perfection I'd been wearing for years. I told him about my work, about Adam, about how things had been good at first, but had started to lose their shine. He listened, truly listened in a way that felt so rare, so much like a lifeline I didn't know I needed. We talked for hours that day, and then we met again the following week, and then again the next. Each time it was like we were peeling back layers of ourselves, layers I hadn't realized I'd been hiding. With Adam I was constantly performing, trying to live up to some idea of what our marriage should be. But with Daniel, I was allowed to just be. We laughed about old memories, talked about life and regrets, about love and pain, and then one day I realized I was looking forward to seeing him, in a way that was different from friendship. There was a subtle shift, a tension in the air that I tried to ignore. I thought it was just the nostalgia of reconnecting with someone from the past. But deep down, I knew it was something more. I didn't see it at first, but looking back, the signs were there. When I started dressing differently for our meetings, wearing clothes I hadn't worn in years, clothes I thought Adam wouldn't notice, I should have known something had changed. I remember one afternoon, just before I was supposed to meet Daniel, I stood in front of the mirror, wondering if I should change back into something more casual, but I didn't. I wore the blouse that Daniel once told me he liked, the one I hadn't worn in years. When I walked into the coffee shop, I caught his gaze immediately. There was something in his eyes, an unspoken acknowledgement of the tension between us, a recognition of something that went beyond friendship. I convinced myself it was harmless. I told myself I was just having a conversation with someone who understood me in ways Adam didn't anymore. But then came the moment that made me realize just how far I'd gone. It was late one night, after one of our usual meetups. I had told Adam I was working late, that I needed to finish the article for next month's issue. But that wasn't where I had been. I was at Daniel's, and when I returned home I felt this strange mixture of guilt and exhilaration. I had never once lied to Adam in such a way, and yet there I was, trying to convince myself that it didn't mean anything. Adam had already gone to bed by the time I got home. He didn't say anything about the late hour. I wondered if he was just too tired to care anymore. Or maybe he already suspected. The thought gnawed at me, but I pushed it away. I couldn't deal with that. Not now. But the next day, Adam was quieter than usual. When I kissed him goodbye before leaving for work, there was a coldness in his touch. It was subtle, but I felt it. His hand lingered for just a second longer than usual, as though he was trying to gauge something. I could tell he was looking for answers in me, even though he didn't know what question to ask. It wasn't long before the small things began to add up. He stopped asking about my day, stopped commenting on the things I was writing. The silence between us grew heavier. I knew it was only a matter of time before he confronted me. But in the meantime, I found myself drawn back to Daniel, to those long talks that made me feel like I was part of something real again. Adam's distance only pushed me further toward him, but I never told Daniel how much I relied on him, how his presence made the emptiness I felt at home less unbearable. He didn't need to know that. We kept it casual at least. I told myself we did, and yet, when he reached out to me with his understanding eyes, I couldn't help but wonder if he saw right through the lies. I told myself, the night Adam finally asked me about my behavior, I almost didn't know how to respond. His voice was calm, almost too calm, but his eyes were searching. "You've been different lately," he said, his words quiet but sharp. "Is something wrong?" I wanted to lie, to tell him it was nothing, that everything was fine, but I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Instead, I whispered, "I'm just tired." It was a lie, but it was the only one I could manage. He nodded, as if accepting my answer, but the look in his eyes stayed with me long after I had gone to bed. The truth was, I wasn't just tired, I was hollow, and I had no idea how to fill the emptiness without tearing everything apart. I could feel it all unraveling as soon as I stepped into the cafe, the warmth of the room contrasting sharply with the cold knot in my stomach. I had told myself that this was the right decision, that walking away from Daniel was the only choice that would keep me from completely losing myself. But as I sat there, waiting for him to arrive, I couldn't shake the uncertainty. I had always been good at hiding things, at playing the part of a perfect wife, to Adam, the successful architect, who everyone admired. But in this moment, as I sat in the quiet corner of the cafe, I couldn't help but wonder if I had convinced myself too well. Daniel had become more than a friend in my mind, and in my heart, even though I'd sworn it wasn't supposed to be anything more. Our conversations had been slow, easy, like they used to be when we were university students sharing dreams, regrets, life's disappointments, and for a while, that's all it was. He listened in a way, Adam didn't. But soon, that listening turned into something else. His touch lingered, when it shouldn't have. His eyes held mine a second too long, and I allowed it. The guilt had been slowly consuming me, but the fear of losing Daniel, the fear of losing that connection I hadn't realized I was so desperately craving, kept me from acting on it. I had known from the start that this could never last. I had made up my mind earlier that morning. I was going to end it. I had to end it. There was no other option if I wanted to salvage what little of my marriage was left. But as I sat there, waiting for Daniel to show up, I questioned everything. What was I doing? Was this the right choice? Was I walking away from a chance at something real? Or was I simply running from the pain of facing the truth? Then I saw him. He walked in, as composed as ever, but something in his eyes made it clear that he too knew this moment was inevitable. We had been dancing around it for weeks, pretending this wouldn't happen, convincing ourselves that our bond was just an innocent escape from our respective lives. But it wasn't. I could feel it in the air, thick between us, as he sat down across from me, his familiar, gentle smile in place. But this time, it didn't feel comforting. It felt like an end. He didn't waste time. He looked at me for a moment before speaking, his voice steady but edged with something I couldn't place. "You know, Lila, I think we both knew this day would come," he said softly, his hands wrapped around the mug in front of him. "But it still feels surreal, doesn't it?" I nodded, forcing a smile that felt more like a mask. "Yeah, I guess I couldn't keep lying to him anymore." I wasn't sure if I was talking about Adam or myself. The words tumbled out, heavy with the burden I had carried for so long. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But it did, and now I need to fix it. Daniel didn't argue. He never did. He simply nodded, his eyes filled with a quiet sadness. He understood. He always had, perhaps too much. The thing about Daniel was that he had been through his own version of betrayal. His ex-wife's infidelity had ripped him apart in ways that left invisible scars. Scars that I could see but never fully understand. So when it came to him and me, there had always been a kind of unspoken agreement that neither of us would push for more. We were both broken in our own ways, and we had both used each other to fill the gaps. But as I sat there, saying the words I had been rehearsing in my head, I knew it was over. This chapter of my life, one I had let spiral out of control, was coming to a close. I had made my decision. I wasn't ready to lose Adam completely, even if the thought of him felt distant and cold. I wasn't sure I knew how to fix things, but I knew I couldn't keep lying to him, and that's when it happened. I heard the door chime, a soft, almost insignificant sound, but it was enough to make my heart jump in my chest. I didn't see him at first. My eyes were fixed on Daniel, his expression unreadable, but I could feel something shift in the air, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My stomach twisted as the door creaked open again, and I turned, just in time to see Adam standing there, frozen in the doorway. I couldn't breathe. Time seemed to freeze in that moment, like the world had suddenly paused, waiting for anything to break the tension. Adam's gaze locked on mine, and I felt the color drain from my face. For a split second, I thought I might pass out. The shock in his eyes was palpable, a mixture of disbelief and something darker, hurt maybe, or something else entirely. I wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't prepared for the quiet devastation on his face, for the way he took in the scene with just one glance, me sitting across from Daniel in a cafe, not hiding, not pretending. I had thought I was the one in control, but in that moment, I knew I had lost that control a long time ago. Adam didn't rush over to confront me. He didn't yell, didn't storm toward us, demanding explanations. He just stood there for what felt like an eternity, taking it all in. Daniel set his coffee cup down slowly, his expression matching mine, surprised, unsure, waiting for something. Adam's eyes flicked from me to Daniel, and back to me again. His mouth tightened into a thin line, and I could see the pain settling in behind his eyes, the realization sinking in. I wanted to say something. I wanted to explain, to apologize, to make everything better, but the words wouldn't come. They were stuck in my throat, like they had always been when it came to facing the truth. Instead, I just sat there, helpless, waiting for him to speak, and then, in the calmest voice I had ever heard him use, Adam spoke. "No, Layla, it's exactly what I thought." His words were quiet, but they were like a punch to the gut. It wasn't anger that laced his voice. It was something colder. It was the quiet acceptance that everything I had been hiding from him had been true. I could see it. Now he had known, all along. He hadn't needed to confront me publicly. He had just needed to see this moment, to confirm his suspicions, and it was enough. He had seen the lies in the small things, the late nights, the vague excuses, the way I had been pulling away from him. All of it had added up, and he hadn't needed me to tell him what he already knew. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The words I had rehearsed, the justifications, all felt hollow in that moment. The truth was laid bare in front of us, and there was no escaping it. I had betrayed him, and now he knew. The car ride home was like moving through thick fog. Adam didn't speak a word, and neither did I. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, I thought I might break it. I could barely see out of the windshield, through the haze of my own thoughts, the weight of what had just happened suffocating me. In the cafe, when Adam walked in and caught me, there was no denying it, no pretending it wasn't happening, no lying to myself any longer. Adam knew. He had known for a while, I realized, from the way his face went pale, from the slow, steady way he took in the scene. He wasn't angry. He was hurt, the kind of hurt you can't hide. Not behind a facade of calm. We drove in silence, and I couldn't bring myself to say anything. What was there to say? I was too afraid of the truth. The real truth, the one I had been running from for so long, the one I had been hiding from him. The affair, the emotional betrayal that had consumed me, and somehow felt necessary. And now, I knew that Adam wasn't the only one who had been betrayed. I had betrayed myself too. I had let things go too far. As we parked in the garage, I could feel the tension in my chest, tightening with every passing second. When we stepped inside our apartment, the familiar smell of the candles Adam liked to light in the evenings felt foreign, like a reminder of the life that was slipping away. I stood by the door for a moment, just breathing, not sure what came next. The apartment felt too quiet, almost suffocating, like it was waiting for something. But I didn't know what. I wasn't sure what to do. I wanted to speak, to beg for forgiveness, but I couldn't find the words. It was as though the silence was louder than anything I could say. Adam didn't speak either. He just walked past me, not looking at me, not acknowledging me. His footsteps were deliberate, steady. It felt like he was giving me space. But I didn't want space. I wanted him to turn around, to tell me that it wasn't too late, that there was still hope, but he didn't. We both ended up sitting in the living room. The only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall, a steady reminder of how time was slipping away. I wanted to look at him, to say something, anything, but I didn't. I couldn't. There was too much between us now. Too much that I had hidden, too much that I had allowed to fester without telling him, without letting him know that something was wrong. But how could I have? How could I have admitted that I wasn't happy? That the love I once thought was so solid had eroded little by little, day by day, until it was nothing more than a shell. And then Adam spoke. His voice was calm, too calm, as if he were trying to control himself. But I could hear the pain in it, the hurt that he was hiding. "How long?" he asked, his eyes not meeting mine. It was a simple question, but it cut through me like a blade. How long had I been lying to him? How long had I been betraying him with Daniel? "A few months," I whispered, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I had never been good at lying, and now with the truth laid bare, I knew there was no going back. The honesty I had avoided for so long had come crashing down all at once, and now I had to face the consequences. Adam didn't say anything. For a long time, I could see his jaw tightening, the muscles in his neck visibly straining, as he fought to hold back whatever emotions he was feeling. The silence in the room felt like it was suffocating me, like the walls were closing in on me. I had never felt so small in my entire life. How could I have let things get this far? How could I have let my emotions and desires spiral out of control? And then, after what felt like an eternity, Adam spoke again, and his words were so quiet, so measured. "Did you love him?" he asked, his voice barely audible, as though the question itself was a weight too heavy to bear. I felt my stomach twist at the question, my chest tightening. Did I love Daniel? I had asked myself that 100 times. I knew the answer. I had loved him, in a way that I hadn't loved Adam in years. But how could I admit that? How could I look at Adam, the man I had been married to for 10 years, and say that I had loved someone else? "I don't know," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. I wanted to say more, to explain it, but the truth felt like it would destroy me, like it would shatter everything that was left of my marriage. So I just sat there, too afraid to speak, too afraid to admit that my feelings had become something I never intended. Adam's expression didn't change. He didn't get angry. He didn't raise his voice. But the way he looked at me so quietly, so intensely was enough. It was more painful than any outburst could have been. He wasn't shouting at me. He was simply seeing me, truly seeing me for the first time in years, and it terrified me. "Why didn't you tell me there was a problem, instead of finding someone else?" His voice was so soft, but the pain in it was unmistakable. I had no answer. I had no good reason. How could I have told him? How could I have admitted that we weren't fine when I had convinced myself that I had everything? I had been so afraid of losing him, of losing what we had built together, that I had ignored the cracks until they became chasms. I tried to speak, tried to find the words to explain it, but nothing came out. The truth was too painful, too raw. The reality, that I had chosen this path, that I had allowed this affair to happen, that I had kept it secret for so long, was too much to bear. "I'm sorry," I said, finally managing to whisper the words, but they were hollow, empty. I could feel the weight of my betrayal crushing me, and I knew that nothing I said would ever be enough to undo the damage I had caused. Adam didn't speak. He simply stood up, slowly, deliberately, as though the decision had already been made in his mind. "I'm sleeping in the guest room," he said, his voice calm, steady. And then he turned and walked away, leaving me sitting there in the silence of our living room. I watched him leave, feeling the weight of the finality in his words. The man I had built my life with, the man I had promised to love and cherish, was leaving me. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally. I knew, In that moment, that things would never be the same again. And then I was alone. The apartment was empty, even though Adam was just a few rooms away. I could hear his footsteps in the hallway, but it didn't matter. The space between us was already too wide to bridge. And I, too, was too far gone, too lost in my own guilt and shame to find my way back. The air was thick in our apartment after the confrontation. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both walking on a razor's edge, each step precariously balanced. Adam's silence had become louder than any argument we could have had. He didn't scream or yell. That was never his style. But the way he avoided my eyes, the way he retreated into himself, spoke volumes. The distance between us grew with every minute that passed. His withdrawal was subtle, but undeniable. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that he didn't know how to care anymore. For the first few days, I tried to fix it. I threw myself into the mundane details of our life together. I cooked meals like I used to, keeping the house neat, and tried my best to engage in conversation, to make things feel normal again. Every night I would climb into bed beside him, the space between us colder than ever. He would turn his back to me, the silence swallowing me whole as I lay there wide-eyed, unable to sleep. I had no idea what was happening to us, or to him. I tried to convince myself that I could fix things, that if I just kept apologizing and showing him how sorry I was, he would soften, and we could move past it. But I could see the doubt in his eyes whenever he glanced at me. He wasn't angry, not in a way I could reach. It was something deeper, a resignation. On the fourth day after the confrontation, I started to feel something shift in the air. A strange sensation crept in that I couldn't ignore anymore. I felt like I was under constant surveillance. Every time I moved, I thought he was watching me. But it wasn't just the intensity of his stare, it was the way his behavior had changed. There was something guarded about him now, as if he had erected walls to keep me out. He hadn't been this distant before, not even when we were in the midst of our busy routines. He'd been preoccupied with work, sure, but there had always been small gestures that kept us tethered, small signs that he cared. Now there was nothing. I kept trying to ignore it, to tell myself that I had no right to question him after what I had done. But that feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. I had to know what was happening, what had changed. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or something else, but I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see the cracks. And so one morning, I went into his study while he was in the shower. I hadn't planned on doing anything. At least, that's what I told myself, but the moment I sat down in front of his laptop, I felt my pulse quicken. There was an email open on his screen, an unread message from a name I didn't recognize. Rebecca. My heart stopped for a moment. I should have walked away. I should have respected his privacy, especially after what had happened between us. But the suspicion, the fear, was too strong. I clicked open the message before I could stop myself. The subject line read, "Last night was unforgettable." I felt the breath catch in my throat. It was an email from someone who wasn't me, someone whose name I had never heard before. The contents were brief, but that didn't make it any easier. Rebecca wrote about how much she missed him, about how they had shared something real during their last meeting, and how she hoped they could see each other again soon. The final line, "Can't wait to see you again," burned into my mind. The room felt like it was spinning. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I wasn't prepared for this. My thoughts were jumbled, my mind racing. I stared at the screen, paralyzed. Could it be true? Had Adam been seeing someone else too? I felt a wave of nausea hit me. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen, unsure of what to do. I wanted to cry, but there were no tears left. I was too shocked, too overwhelmed by the realization that everything I had believed was starting to crumble before me. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, I knew I had to confront him. I had to face whatever this was. I couldn't keep living in this uncertainty, wondering if everything I had known was just a facade. So when Adam finally came out of the shower, looking the same as always, dressed in his work clothes, I didn't waste any time. I asked him point blank, "Who is Rebecca?" I blurted out, my voice tight with fear and anxiety. He froze mid-step, his face draining of color. The tension in the room was palpable. He didn't answer immediately, his eyes flickering away from mine, as if searching for the right words. But there were no right words. His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. After what seemed like an eternity, Adam sighed, a deep, almost defeated sound. His gaze met mine, and for the first time in days, I saw something real in his eyes. It wasn't anger, it wasn't even regret. It was just resignation. "You're not the only one who made mistakes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hit me like a slap across the face. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind raced, trying to make sense of his words. But nothing seemed to fit. What did he mean? Had he been seeing Rebecca? Had he been hiding this from me, just as I had been hiding my own affair? I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I didn't know what to ask, how to process the fact that he had been keeping something from me, something just as important and painful as what I had done. All I could do was stare at him, my chest tightening with the weight of it all. Was he on the verge of cheating, too? Was he lying to me, just as I had lied to him? For a long time, he didn't say anything. He just stood there watching me, with an unreadable expression on his face. I felt the anger start to bubble up inside me, but it was tempered by something else, something that felt almost like shame. How could I be angry at him, when I had done the exact same thing? Finally, Adam spoke again, his voice soft but firm. "I never intended for it to happen, but I've been trying to figure out what's missing too, just like you have." His words felt like a confession, like he was admitting to something he had been too afraid to confront. But there was still so much left unsaid. There was still so much between us, so many questions that had no answers. "Does it matter?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't even tell if I was asking him, or myself. Did it matter anymore? After everything that had happened, did we even have the right to be angry with each other? Adam's silence hung in the air, and I couldn't look at him anymore. I didn't know where we stood. I didn't know where I stood. All I could do was turn away. The realization sinking in that our marriage, our relationship had been broken long before either of us had admitted it. We had been hiding from each other for so long, afraid to face the truth, and now it felt like everything was unraveling. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what came next. But I knew one thing for sure. Nothing was the same anymore. I had been pacing around the house for what felt like hours, my mind racing with all the things I hadn't said. Every corner of our home felt suffocating. Every object reminding me of how far apart Adam and I had drifted. The silence had become unbearable, and it felt as though it was pulling us both deeper into an abyss we couldn't escape. I had already made up my mind that morning. It had to end this constant evasion of the truth, this constant lie we were living. I was going to tell him everything. I didn't expect it to be easy. Of course, how could it be? But the guilt was consuming me, and each day that passed made the lies feel heavier, almost unbearable. Adam had been so distant, so absorbed in his work. Even when I tried to reach out to him, it felt like I was speaking to a stranger. And then there was Daniel, who in his own way, had become a person I could turn to when the walls around me grew too high. But what had started as something small, just a conversation here and there, grew into something else. I never intended for it to happen, but I couldn't deny that I had crossed a line. And now I had to face Adam, face the consequences of my actions. When I walked into the kitchen that night, Adam was sitting at the table, a cup of coffee in front of him, staring at the counter, as if lost in thought. The same table where we had shared so many intimate moments during the early years of our marriage, now felt like a place where everything was going to fall apart. He didn't look up when I entered. The silence was thick between us, a silence that had become so familiar over the past few months, but somehow it felt different now. This was the moment. I had no more excuses left. I took a deep breath before sitting down across from him. His eyes lifted slightly, just enough to meet mine, but then quickly darted away. I could see the tension in his body, the way he was holding himself, like he was waiting for something. Maybe he had been expecting this conversation for a while, but neither of us had been brave enough to initiate it. Until now, I need to tell you everything, I said softly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Adam didn't respond, but I saw his fingers tighten around his mug. He wasn't angry, at least, not yet. He was just waiting. I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering my courage. There was no turning back now. I had to say it, had to face the reality of what I had done. I had an affair, I said, my voice shaking. The words hung in the air between us like an accusation, like a dark shadow that had been lingering for too long. For a long time, Adam didn't say anything. He didn't even move. His gaze was fixed on the counter, but I could see his jaw tightening, his lips pressed into a thin line. So I could hear his breathing, slow and deliberate, but still he didn't speak. The silence in the room was almost unbearable. I thought he might shout, or at the very least demand an explanation, but there was nothing, just silence. I waited for him to say something, anything, but he remained still. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "How long?" he asked, his voice low, but steady. It wasn't a question I was prepared to answer, but I had to. It was the truth, the painful, ugly truth. I felt my stomach tighten as I answered, my words coming out in a rush. A few months it started as just talking. You know, he was someone who listened, someone who understood, and then it just happened. I couldn't bring myself to look at him. Instead, I focused on the grain of the wooden table, trying to keep my composure. Adam didn't say anything right away. He just stared at the counter, his expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if he was processing what I had said, or if he was already somewhere else shutting down. Maybe, the way he always did when things got too difficult to face. "Did you love him?" The question came softly, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. I had thought about that so many times, but now, sitting here with Adam's eyes on me, I couldn't answer it the way I wanted to. I had never loved Daniel. I loved the idea of being heard, of being seen, of feeling like I mattered again. But I didn't love him. It wasn't about him. It was about me. "No," I whispered, my voice cracking. I loved the feeling I was missing, not the person himself. Adam exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging. "And you think I didn't feel lonely too?" His words were quiet, but they carried the weight of years of unmet needs. "I've been here, Layla, working, providing. But you don't see me. Not the way you used to." The weight of those words hit me hard. He was right. I hadn't seen him, hadn't noticed the distance growing between us. We had both been so consumed by our own worlds, so focused on what we lacked, that we had completely forgotten to nurture the connection that had once bound us together. The love we shared had withered, unnoticed. I didn't know how to fix it, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't know how to tell you that I was unhappy. I thought if I could find something to make me feel alive again, everything would be okay. But I was wrong. The air between us felt thick, heavy with unspoken emotions. Adam sat back, his hands resting on the edge of the table. His expression was still unreadable, but there was something in his eyes now. Something that made me feel even worse. He wasn't angry with me. He wasn't even hurt. He was just defeated. He had known deep down that something wasn't right, but he had chosen to ignore it. We had both chosen to ignore it. "Did you think I didn't feel lonely too?" he asked again, his voice a little firmer this time. "I've been feeling that way for years, Layla. I thought I was doing enough, but I wasn't. I thought if I just kept working harder, if I just kept giving you what you needed, but it wasn't enough." I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes as I finally met his gaze. He was right. We had both failed each other in different ways, and now, we were left to face the aftermath. The betrayal I had committed was the catalyst, but the truth was, our marriage had been crumbling long before I ever met Daniel. "So what happens now?" I asked quietly. I had no idea what the right answer was. I wasn't sure if there was even a right answer anymore. "Do we even try to fix this? Can we fix this?" Adam's eyes softened, but the sadness in them was undeniable. He sighed, his fingers running over the edge of his mug. "I don't know, Layla. I don't know if we can. But we can't just pretend it didn't happen. We can't just go back to how things were." I nodded, feeling a weight settle in my chest. "So what do we do?" "I don't know," he said again, his voice quiet. "But we have to be honest with each other. No more lies, no more hiding." I swallowed hard, tears starting to fall. I didn't know what the future held for us. But one thing was clear. This was the turning point. Either we would find a way to rebuild, piece by painful piece, or we would have to let go of what was left. The choice was ours to make. I remember the day it all started to change. Adam and I had been drifting, but I never admitted it. Not even to myself. Our conversations had become mechanical, and the intimacy that once existed between us had been replaced with silence or casual exchanges. I could feel the void in the space between us, but I was too afraid to confront it. Instead, I poured myself into my work, my writing, hoping that maybe, just maybe, something would snap us out of it. But it didn't. And then Daniel entered my life again. I had met Daniel years ago, back in university. He was always thoughtful, introspective, someone I could talk to for hours about anything. He'd been a friend, someone I trusted. When I bumped into him one afternoon at a cafe, I didn't think much of it. We exchanged pleasantries, and before I knew it, we were talking about life, our careers, and everything that had changed since those university days. I didn't see it then, but that conversation marked the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. He was kind, attentive, a listener in a way Adam hadn't been in a long time. For the first time in years, I felt seen. At first it was harmless. Just a few coffee meetings here and there, catching up on life, but then it wasn't enough. I started to look forward to our talks. To his understanding, Adam had become a ghost in our home, distant, preoccupied, as though he wasn't there even when he was. I couldn't blame him. His work consumed him and I was left alone with the growing sense of emptiness that had taken root. And when Daniel was around, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. Attention. It wasn't romantic at first. It was the kind of attention I had forgotten how to ask for. But that shift, those small moments of connection built up, until they became something more than just friendship. It didn't take long for me to realize I was crossing a line. The guilt started eating at me. I had never imagined myself as the type of person who would cheat, but it wasn't cheating, was it? At least, not in the physical sense. I was just talking, listening, feeling understood. But when Daniel leaned in one evening, just slightly, to brush a strand of hair from my face, I knew I had gone too far. That spark, that electric connection, was undeniable, and it terrified me. I wanted to pull away, to stop it before it became something I couldn't walk back from. But I didn't. I let it happen, and once I let it happen, I couldn't undo it. It wasn't until one night, weeks later, when I finally decided I had to end it. The guilt had become unbearable, and I couldn't live with the constant fear of Adam finding out. We needed to rebuild, and I couldn't keep lying to myself or him. I called Daniel and asked to meet at the cafe, a neutral space. I had my mind made up, no more. It was time to let go of something that was never meant to be. But as I walked into the cafe, my stomach twisted, and then I saw Adam standing there, just a few tables away, staring at us with wide eyes. My heart stopped, the world slowed, and in that moment, everything seemed to freeze. Daniel's coffee cup trembled in his hand, and I couldn't even bring myself to look at Adam's face. I knew what he had seen, what he had to have seen. It wasn't just the two of us sitting together. It wasn't just the fact that we were talking. It was everything that had been building up, the years of neglect, the unspoken distance, the lies I had been telling myself. Adam wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't even frowning. He was just staring at us, his face blank, like he had just found out something he'd always known, but refused to acknowledge. His eyes were wide with disbelief, like the man who had walked in wasn't the one I had married, wasn't the person who had stood by my side for 10 years. I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. And then Adam did the thing I never expected. He walked over, calmly, deliberately, and said one simple sentence. It's exactly what I thought. I don't know what I expected. Anger, tears, something. But it wasn't that. It wasn't the quiet devastation in his voice, the raw hurt in his eyes. The words cut deeper than any shouting could have. I wanted to explain, to say something, anything, but I couldn't. All I could do was stare at him. He didn't wait for me to speak. He turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving me there with Daniel, who looked just as unsure of what had just happened. That night, the silence between us at home was unbearable. I sat at the kitchen table, where we had always had our most honest conversations, but now it felt like a battlefield. Adam didn't say much at first. He just sat there, his hands folded in front of him, his eyes tired but intense. I wanted to apologize, to say that it wasn't what he thought, but the words felt hollow. How could I apologize for something that had been eating at me for months? Finally, Adam spoke, his voice low but steady. How long? I couldn't answer immediately. I had no idea how long I had been lying to him, how long I had been living in this world of denial. How long had I been ignoring the cracks in our marriage, the loneliness that had festered, And how long had I been justifying it all by saying, I needed something more, something he couldn't give me? Does it even matter? I finally managed to ask. Yeah, it matters, he replied. His gaze was fixed on me now, sharp and unforgiving. How long? A few months, I whispered, my voice shaking. He nodded, but his face didn't change. Did you love him? I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him that it wasn't about love, that it was about something I couldn't even explain. But the truth was, I couldn't even say it was about Daniel. It was about the void between Adam and me, the emptiness that I had let consume me until I couldn't see past it. I loved the feeling, Adam. I loved feeling seen, feeling wanted. I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but I never loved him. His face softened for just a moment, and then he looked away, his eyes distant. And do you think I didn't feel lonely too? But I didn't cheat on you. I didn't have an answer for that. I knew what he meant. He had been lonely too. I had seen it in the way he withdrew, in the way he disappeared into his work. But I had been too proud to ask for more, too scared to say anything. We had both been broken, but we had both kept pretending we were fine. Later that night, after the silence had stretched into hours, Adam finally said, I don't know if I can trust you again, but I don't want to give up on us. Lila, I don't want to throw everything away. The words hung there between us. We had two choices: try again and rebuild, or face the reality that we were already too far gone. We decided to try. We weren't sure how it would go, but we decided to start fresh. The following weeks were filled with counseling sessions and long, difficult conversations. We didn't have all the answers, but we were both trying. It wasn't easy, but it was real. We were still hurting, but we were still here, trying. That's all we could do now, and maybe that would be enough.